At Bath Savings, you know us for our exceptional customer service. And that service extends to our secure online and mobile banking solutions, so you can feel comfortable accessing and managing your accounts wherever you are. And it's all backed by the same personalized customer service from neighbors right here in your community. To learn more about Bath Savings online and mobile banking solutions, visit bathsavings.com. Bath Savings, your neighbor, your bank.
Hager Enterprises, a paving and excavation contractor specializing in all sorts of site work, utility installations, and road construction since 1987.
"1975 was a magical year in high school basketball in the state of Maine, and maybe questionably the two best teams in the state were in Class B that year, Foxcroft Academy and Madomic Valley High School, both unbeaten and looking for the school's first gold ball. Both teams had played for a regional championship the year before and lost, but this year was their year. Unfortunately, only one team can win. These two teams had so many similarities. Both became regional schools at about the same time, joining multiple towns of blue-collar neighborhoods. And when it came to basketball, they had two young, hard-charging, innovative coaches. And as they say, the rest is history. There is a new book out, The Last One Out of Town, Turn Off the Lights, chronicling that 75 championship run by Foxcroft Academy, and culminating with playing the game of their life against the high-flying Madomic Valley Panthers in that championship game.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of High School Hoops. I'm your host, Larry Seidlinger, and I'm telling you right now, I'm wicked excited about what we've got to talk about right now. Because we have got the author of one of the best, it's going to be a #1 selling book, The Last Man Out of Town, Turn Out the Lights. And it's all about the 75 state championship game that happened 50 years ago between Foxcroft Academy and our Madomic Valley Panthers. And in the studio today, I have Dave Albee, who is the author of The Last One Out of Town, Turn Out the Lights, Kevin Nelson, the star center from Foxcroft Academy, and Al Barron, the star of the Madomic Valley High Flying Panthers. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and coming to LCTV studios and sitting down and talking about this. For you folks at home, off camera, it's been like a reunion, and I'm just tickled to death to have them here. Dave, you're a sports writer.
Yes.
You've had a distinguished career. You've Super Bowls and World Series and everything in between. Mm-hmm. What possessed you to want to write a book? And what drove you to this particular story?
Well,
you are a Dover Foxcroft graduate.
I graduated from Foxcroft Academy, born and raised in Dover Foxcroft, so I have a personal connection to this. And it sort of how a fluke had happened as I got the job. This was Kevin's junior year. I was working in an A&P grocery store in Dover Foxcroft. I had gone to a radio broadcasting school in Boston. It didn't pan out, so I needed to pay off my college debt. So I was working in the store, and there was a person by the name of Ree Miller, who at that time was the sports editor of the Piscataqua Observer, and she would come into the store every week and get her groceries, and I would talk to her. And this particular week she came in, it was the season opening game was coming up, and Foxcroft probably had its best team in 20 years, and they were opening up the schedule against Orono, who was the defending state champions at the time. So I asked her, matter of fact, I said, "Are you going to cover the big game on Saturday night?" She said, "Well, no, I don't really know a lot about basketball." And for whatever reason, I said, "Well, would you like me to cover it? Would you like me to go to it?" And she said, "Yeah, go ahead." So I went down to Orono on a Saturday night and covered the game. And on Sunday, I wrote it out longhand. I didn't have a typewriter. Wrote it out longhand. Monday, I turned it into the newspaper, the Piscataqua Observer. And on Tuesday, the editor and publisher of the Piscataqua Observer, Jim Thompson, called me up and offered me a full-time job. He wanted to hire me full-time on the thing. So he saw some talent in me, and that's how I wound up covering the Foxcroft Academy ponies all the way Kevin's junior year and senior year to the state championship game. And lo and behold, it's always been in the back of my head. I said, someday
you're going to write a book.
I'll write a book, yeah.
And this is your first book?
First book, yes.
So how far into this adventure did you get before you found or you discovered this is really going to be an adventure?
Probably I talked to the first two people I talked to were Kevin and Skip Hansen, the coach. And after I talked to them, it's like I'm hearing stories that I hadn't heard before, and I kept going down. You know, every story would take me down a different rabbit hole, and I would find some sort of another story. I went in different directions, and all of a sudden, you know, I start talking to players. I end up tracking down Al Barron and talking to Al, who was fantastic, and it just kept one thing after another. It just snowballed to this unbelievable story that needs to be told and should be told, because it's more than just a state championship game. It's a big story about life in small town basketball and rural basketball in Maine.
Kevin, when did you were a big kid in a small town. When did you decide, or when did basketball become your life?
Boy, I will say
You were always a big kid growing up.
it started probably in elementary school for me, and it might have started for a lot of other kids. I think probably the first thing that I can remember, of course, grew up in the town of Monson. I actually didn't grow up in the town of Monson. I grew up 5 miles outside the town of Monson on a farm. And I remember my dad, actually, when I was in elementary school, he made a backboard for my brother and I, and he put it up in the barn that we had inside, so we could play day or night. We could play, weather was bad, good. So we put the backboard up, but we needed to have a rim and a basketball, and so I sold flower and vegetable seeds to neighbors and friends. And back then, the American Seed Company, I think it was, and I remember doing that. And I don't think that my family and friends really needed the flowers or the vegetables, but when I told them what I was buying with my proceeds, a rim and a basketball, they all sort of said, "Oh, okay, all right, I'll take pity on you and we'll buy your seeds." So I bought a rim and a basketball, mounted it on the backboard so we could go out and play. And so the start of that whole thing was about around that time, and then starting to go to games at Monson Academy to see the varsity play, and seeing players like Jake Smith and Buddy Levitt and Roy Taylor and people like that I just, they had a great influence on me.
Your first heroes on
My
basketball.
first, yeah. And, they were going to the tournament every year. And in 1968, I'm in 5th grade. I'm in 5th grade in Monson Elementary School. Monson Academy goes to the Class S state championship in the Portland Expo and wins the state Class S state championship, a small school. I'm in 5th grade and I'm thinking, okay, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going to play, is Monson Academy. I'm going to be playing for Gary Webb, who was the coach, and he's also my 5th and 6th grade teacher. So small town stuff right there. And unfortunately, within a year, we find out that we're no longer going to be a school. They close the school down because of consolidation, and we end up going to Dover Foxtrot. So the start was about then.
So Al, you have a little different background. You didn't grow up around here.
No.
As a kid. You came here and stopped at Moody's Diner.
I did.
Tell the folks at home a little bit about, because I think this is a fascinating story of how you happened to wind up in Waldoboro.
It certainly is, and it doesn't happen to too many people very often like that. I was a city kid. My parents, we lived in Danbury, Connecticut, a factory town in southwestern Connecticut, and my father wanted to get out of the rat race. He decided he didn't want to live there anymore. The town was growing and getting bigger and bigger, and it was a big, giant high school with 3,000 kids, and he wanted to move to Maine. So for years, we looked for real estate, and all over the place, all the way up the coast, all the way from like Cape Elizabeth to MDI. We looked at a lot of different places, and he didn't find what he liked, and we put it off, and we were looking around in Waldoboro. Parker Spofford was the realtor, and we stopped into Moody's Diner for a bite to eat and sat down. And a very nice waitress that we already knew because we'd eaten there before, Edie Hoke was her name. She lived right up North Waldoboro. She comes over, "You play basketball?" she says. Yes, I do a little bit. I was probably 16 at the time, 15 or 16. she turns around, goes, I see her go in, they have a phone booth at Moody's Diner.
Still there.
Still works. She goes into the phone booth, and the next thing I know, and my parents, Mr. Art Dyer, who lived in Friendship about 15 minutes away, comes walking in. God, you gotta move around here, you gotta move around here. So, while we're working on it, we have a line on a farm in Washington, Maine, which we ended up buying, and the whole thing just came full circle. My parents, we moved in the fall of '73. We moved here to Maine, and my parents were selling the house in Connecticut and all that. I lived with the Dyers for about a month and a half down in Friendship, and they're like a family to me. I mean, I lived with them and their 2 sons, and it was just magic. It really was. And then I started playing ball here.
And the rest is history, so they say. But Dave, so what was when you approached Kevin about doing a book? What was his first reaction?
Well, I think we're going down memory lane.
Oh, yeah.
So all of a sudden, bells are going off, whistles are going off. Hey, we got something here. And I think when I did the initial interviews with both Skip and Kevin, I purposely said, listen, let's limit this in time. I don't want to tire you guys out. Let's talk for an hour. If you're tired, we'll stop. And inevitably, whenever I talk to Kevin and Skip, the 1-hour interview turned into a 2-hour interview, and we're just going back and forth. And then Kevin's calling me up or texting me and says, oh, I forgot to tell you this, I forgot to tell you that. And then, like I said, one story led to another story, led to another person, led to this, led to that. And all of a sudden, I said, my God, I've got a massive amount of thing here. And I talked to 50 or 60 people and probably could have talked to another 50 to 60, but at some point, I've got to sit down and write the book. And this all started, I think, in November of 2022, and here we are, 2 years and 4 months later, and the book's coming out. It's a lot of work going into it, but it was, Kevin's excitement, and Kevin was great, and Skip's excitement, everyone, like I said, it's rekindling old memories and really good memories, and from there, you just take off.
And Kevin, what was your first opinion, first thoughts, when somebody approached you about writing a book about your life?
Who gets to do this?
I mean, you're a pretty humble farm kid, farm boy from a really small town, and a guy who went to your school. Did you guys know each other?
We knew each other, yes.
You knew,
I was a senior when he was a freshman.
So yeah, you kind of knew each other, but even still.
Yeah, my brother was in David's class, and we knew each other then, and I didn't know what to, I remember I got an email from Dave in October of 2022, late October, saying this is what he wanted to do because he got inspired from his 50th class reunion earlier that year about a topic he wanted to do, and this was the topic. And so one thing led to another, and the snowball. This became a huge snowball, and then
on a steep hill,
and very steep. And then Al got involved with this too, from the perspective from Al, which just added so much to the whole story.
Yes.
It was kind of overwhelming, and one of the people I have to thank most of all is my wife for putting up with the late night phone calls between San Francisco and Maine.
I'm on the West Coast,
because we had a number of them, and we just keep. You just keep talking about certain things, and one thing leads to another, and it's almost impossible to end because we had so much to talk about. And I'm thankful that after 50 years, we still have the memories to be able to recall. So it was kind of overwhelming, to be honest with you, but it's so much fun. This has been just a blast.
Speaking of overwhelming, did you have any idea, or how long did it take you to realize, maybe that's a better question, how passionate the basketball fans are in Waldoboro as a 16-year-old kid? You found out real quick.
Coming right in, it was absolutely incredible, the passion they had and the rivalries between all the schools, Camden, Rockport, Lincoln Academy, Georges Valley. It was incredible. I always have thought of it as, and it's a little bit exaggeration, it's a microcosm of like North Carolina, Duke, NC State, Wake Forest. They were that passionate about the basketball and going back and forth. We just had a great group of schools there with a lot of talent, and you had to be on your toes to win every night. You really did.
Now, we talked off camera a little bit for the folks at home, the similarities that these two schools had.
Yeah.
Foxcroft and Madomic Valley, both were regional schools that consolidated into an SAD. Both were looking for their first gold ball. And both had two exceptionally big men, exceptional players. two of the best in the state, and in your case, probably you were the Cooper flag of your era, and you weren't too far behind Al. That the parallels it's just. I don't know. I can't figure. You have the right to tell me what the word would be.
Well, in 1975, these were the two mythical giants. So
They
to
were.
speak. Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
because at that time there was no. You didn't see them on TV. You didn't see them on YouTube. Basically, all you knew about the teams and the players was what you saw on a roster and what you saw on a box score.
Yeah.
They met each other at basketball camp, and Al and his teammates made a surprise trip up to Foxcroft during the season to scout him again. But basically, it was very little. I just remember knowing that Al was 6'6", and that was big. And Kevin's 6'8", but 6'6". I mean, Kevin's never come up against somebody that big. And just again, looking at that, thank God, this Al Barron must be incredible, And boy, Foxcroft, I don't know. This isn't, this doesn't look good in the state. And the other thing, Larry, was out of the 4 classifications that year, Madomic and Foxcroft were the only 2 undefeated teams in the state championship games. All the other state championship games had teams that had losses. They were the only 2 going head-to-head, and Madomic Valley was the only #1 seeded team in their regional tournament to make it to the state championship game, because Foxcroft was the #2 seed in the Eastern Maine tournament.
Which was kind of ironic, because they were a great team, but you hadn't played the schedule that MDI
Right, yes.
MDI, that would be a great trivia question down the road.
Yeah, who was the #1 seed if it wasn't Foxcroft?
If
it was
wasn't
MDI.
Foxcroft, it was MDI. Did you have any idea going into the tournament that did you think you was going to, I'm pretty sure Al thought they were going all the way to the state championship game. Foxcroft feel the same way?
I think that when we beat Orono in the Eastern Maine final, it was we were excited, but me personally, I just knew that, wait a minute now, it's not all over. We still have one more game to play.
Yeah.
And when we found out that it was Madomic who was our opponent, and then we found out a little bit more about them, it felt kind of daunting, because we knew what they did in the tournament and how well they played and how big they were. And we're talking about 3 elite big men that they had on their team with Al, in Charlie Begley and Russ Luce. I mean, they were elite, what they term now elite big men. And so, that was something we'd never faced. Al was the best player I played against all season long, and this is the best team that we were going to play all season. And so we were, it was a little daunting, but as I've always said, I've always felt, since Dave and I have talked about this, in analyzing our team, we had our team were a group of what I thought were fearless, athletic, and competitive guys. That's just what they were. I mean, and we blended together quite well. But the whole architect of that whole blending was Skip Hansen. He was our coach at that point in time, and he was my coach for all 4 years in high school. And he was just a brilliant coach in my eyes. And I just remember, how you click with some people. Well, that's how I was with Skip. I just clicked with him. I knew, we just were on the same plane and so forth. So going into that, we knew that we probably weren't favored to win that game. So, and the other thing too, in going in there, and I don't know if Al, we never had a chance to even go in and practice in the Civic Center before we played.
Yeah.
The first time I ever stepped on that court was going through warm-ups for the game, and same with
Me too.
Al.
First time I'd ever been in that building, as far as I remember. I'd never been in the building
And that's
before.
crazy to think that in this day and age, where
I
you
think
get
now-
to.
I think nowadays they
Yeah.
get
Nowadays
get to do that.
They go out and play.
Yeah.
But Al, there was a reason why you guys scored 100 points a game, because, or average 90 points a game in the tournament. You had some pretty good players on that team.
We love to run, and we through defense, which we spent the entire year learning defense and all summer learning defense from Coach Dyer. As soon as the game started, we threw that out the window. We started running and get that ball and fire it off the rebound and fire it out like a quarterback. And whoever got it, me, Luce, or Begley usually, or Wayne LaHaye, who was as good a rebounder as anybody, and run the ball and run it back, go back, and just wait to get it again. When that ball, that's when the game started, as soon as we got the ball.
Well, I thought it was interesting looking back at the score sheets. Dyer's teams didn't give up 80 points a game.
Right.
In that tournament, you gave up 80 points 2 or 3 times.
We did.
Of course, you scored 90 and 100.
Right.
That's right.
So
That's
coach
right.
coach looks at it a little bit different. I'm sure he was upset.
Yeah.
But interesting. What was your thoughts, Al, when you saw Dover Foxcroft Academy pull up to the gym in a Greyhound bus? That didn't happen in 19. I'm not sure it happens today, but that didn't happen in 1975.
No, I was like, wow, it was a Bangor and Aroostook bus, I think, or whatever the bus line was back then, and I was like, wow, they have a chartered bus. Holy good. But we had our driver Wendell Spence. He drove us to every game in the same school.
He was your good luck charm.
He was our good luck charm, and there was enough money from the Boosters Club. We could have showed up in any kind of bus that anybody wanted, but we wanted Wendell Spence and the old yellow bus, and we pulled in, and it was very impressive to see them come in that bus. And probably a little distracting, but I'm not blaming that for anything on the game, but it was a little distracting to see that. These guys file out.
Larry, that was the first time they had ever done that, because generally they also traveled.
I'm sure you did. Yeah,
that was really a special occasion.
They were surprised.
Yeah.
They had that the day of the game. They had a luncheon for the team at the Blethyn House in Dover Foxcroft, and that's, I think, when you guys came out of the Blethyn House is when you found out that you were going to be going on that bus, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I do.
Fantastic.
Do you remember, Kevin, the first time you heard about Al Barron from Dartmouth Valley?
Well, I think we ran into each other at Pine Tree Camp.
Yes.
In 1974, and Pine Tree Camp was up at Colby College and Thomas College. It was the best clinic in Maine at that time, and I think that's where Al and I first met each other, and we were mixed in with a group of probably the best players in Maine at that time, and then they brought up some players from New York City, from Power Memorial High School back then, and there was a guy named Brendan Malone who actually brought his kids up because he knew Coach Whitmore and so forth. And,
Another guy named Alcindo went to that school too, didn't he?
Yeah, some guy named Alcindo.
Power Memorial, yeah.
Yeah, and so I had to throw that in there.
Yeah.
So that's where Al and I had actually, I think, met each other, and then of course, kind of we followed in the newspaper. We'd follow in the newspaper the progress that they had made during the season and everything. So that's where it kind of started, though.
When did you realize how good he was?
At basketball camp that summer. He
was the real deal.
He was the only true big man. I was not really a true big man. I was more like a power forward who would shoot from outside. Kevin was a true big man underneath, and there weren't any of those in the state of Maine then. He was the one. I played in Connecticut in a very competitive conference. We didn't have any big men like Kevin there. We had a lot of big guys that beat the crap out of me during the games when I was a sophomore, because I was young. I didn't weigh. I weighed like 190, and I was this tall, and I took my lumps. But he was a true big man. He really was.
At that camp too, at that clinic, if you remember, that was pretty memorable for me because they brought up the Celtics had just won in 1974, had won the NBA championship. Well, Dave Cowens had come up, and he was at the clinic, and he gave a guest lecture there and so forth. And so I've got a little picture of us out there with some players with Dave Cowens. So that's, and talking about big men, he was in that day and age. He was like the model for all of us.
Yeah, he was 6'9".
Yeah, he was 6'9".
Yeah, so you could look him in the eye.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And he was, and he was like, I don't know if he was the MVP or whatever, but to have a world champion at that clinic.
Incredible.
That was wow.
Great atmosphere.
It was.
The Pine Tree camp.
Dave, I want to go back to researching the book. So much positive has come out of this book. I know people at home are going to love reading it because it's such a positive slant on high school sports, on discipline as a coach, what good coaches expect out of their teams.
Yeah.
But in writing it and researching it, did you feel like you maybe had a handle on your own little Hoosiers story? The great movie, The Hoosiers. I mean, I just read your book. I couldn't put it down. I got the digital copy. Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, this is Gene Hackman's story all over again in Dover Foxcroft.
Yeah, Kevin's Jimmy Chitwood. That's what it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Hoosiers is my favorite movie of all time, and I'll watch it year round. I love it that much, and I'm a big Gene Hackman fan anyways. But it sort of went that way. And again, when you start out with Kevin and Skip, and you're talking about this, and each interview takes you in a different direction.
There's so many sidebacks.
Yeah, exactly. It's what it is. And the story, the book itself is dozens of little funny stories and anecdotes, and it was a blast doing it. And the research was, it fuels you to keep going more. Well, I need to check on this. I need to check on that. But the Hoosiers aspect of it, again, it's the small town basketball team is the underdog type thing, and it sort of felt that way to me. And I had grown up in the town, and Foxcroft had no basketball tradition whatsoever until Kevin came and Skip came along. And all of a sudden, the town it's always been a football town, and it was never a basketball town. And all of a sudden, this team comes along, and I think Kevin described it as sort of this meteor landed in Dover Foxcroft in 1975, and that's sort of what it was. It's like they captured this lightning in a bottle type thing that one year, and obviously Foxcroft has not won a state championship since then in basketball, and I think they've only got to the Eastern Maine finals or the tournament final, regional finals, just twice since
Now,
then.
you spent
50
a
years ago.
lot of time in the research talking to Skip Hansen
Yes.
and his family. Any remorse for not being able to get hold of Mr. Dyer at Medina Valley?
Well, I did try to get a hold of Art. Yeah, there's a number of regrets in not being able to talk to Art. Art and I actually, and Al introduced me to him through email, and I ended up calling Art one day, but Art could not hear me very well, so I said, Art, this is what I'm going to do. Why don't I send you my questions in an email form? And he gave me his email address, and I sent, I think I sent him twice. I sent him emails with questions, and I never heard back from him. Now, there might have been something there.
Who knows the technology?
But it was somebody, but it also might have been a situation of thinking, well, maybe Al doesn't like the questions I'm asking.
No.
And I know that when I tracked down Dean Erickson, and Dean said, Dave, I love your idea and this and that, but that brings back some bad memories for me. So I understand. I didn't want to cross that line where I forced somebody to talk about something they felt uncomfortable talking about, like Al. Al was incredible. I mean, along with Tommy Philbrick, the two guys I sort of reconnected with, and Tommy was a star in Orono. They were so open and honest, and I joke now that Al and I have become pen pals more than anything else now.
So it's keeping
We
track.
keep in touch all the time. We're
all
texting
kinds of
each other
stuff.
back and forth all the time now. But it's without that insight from the other siders, from the outsiders, or from the enemy, or whatever you want to call it, from the opponent's side, that contributed so much. Al told me some incredible stories that I used in the book, and that makes the whole thing. I mean, everybody's so giving of their answers and their time and their honesty and how candid they are, and that was, from a reporter standpoint, from a writer standpoint, that's the blessing. When they give you that kind of information and tell you that kind of information, and you tell those stories, it's fantastic.
Kevin, you played for two legendary coaches, Skip Hansen and Skip Chappelle at UMaine. What were the differences? What were the similarities?
I think probably the best way to characterize that or to answer that is that I think Skip Hansen was pretty folded into like the summer basketball camps that Skip Chappelle would put on, and so Skip Hansen was a coach there during the summer times and so forth. So a lot of the teaching and the philosophy and stuff, would pass through between them and so forth. And I was real fortunate. I mean, I know I was fortunate because I got to play for Skip Hansen for 4 years in high school. I didn't play for 3 or 4 coaches. I played for Skip, and then in college, I played for Skip Chappelle for 4 years. So I had that constant uniformity that I think helped me because I think I did better because I knew what to expect from the same thinking of the coaches. They were men of. I'm looking through things now through a man approaching 70 years old, as opposed to thinking of things as an 18-year-old. So now I look back and I see my 2 coaches. They were 2 men of high integrity. They were not coaches who wanted to tear you down to build you back up. There's some teams and some players you need to do that, but that wasn't me, and so I appreciated that, and I appreciated the type of people that they were. High character people, intelligent coaches, and I was really fortunate, and I wouldn't have changed a thing.
Were you in awe going to UMaine?
Yes.
UMaine's a big place from Dover Foxcroft.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh yes, my first year at Orono was not something to write home about. It just wasn't. I actually asked myself a couple times going between the dormitory and Memorial Gym for practice or for scrimmages of saying, what have I got myself into? I mean, because I came on the scene at Orono back when I was a freshman, and Al was a freshman there as well, that, you know, I'm playing against guys that are just as big and quick and fast and stronger than I am, and this was a real eye-opener for me. And I was really lucky, though, because I have people like Bobby Warner, you know, who was just this immense figure at Orono that, you know, just as far as a role model, he was just perfect. And then people like a Steve Gavitt, who I think Stevie was one of the people who I learned how to be a college basketball player from. He would offer you suggestions and advice, and he was very generous with his time with me. So it was a step, Larry. It was a huge step, very much so. It's like when I went from 8th grade to my freshman year in high school.
Well, yeah.
Thinking,
but I think people can relate to that because everybody does that, but not everybody goes from high school to college to play basketball. I mean, 99% of the kids that graduate from high school teams, that's their last game. You know, but to go on and play Division I, the biggest school in the state, that's huge.
Yeah, it is.
That's
It
huge.
is. Yeah.
Al, you didn't go. You went to UMaine. You started at UMaine, but then you transferred.
Freshman year, yes, I did. Yeah, I was there freshman year, and I played on the freshman team. I was one of the last 2 or 3 cut. Had a good year on the freshman team. For various reasons, I decided another path. I had a girlfriend who graduated in '76 from Madomic, and she was at the time going to Husson, so I decided I'd transfer to Husson.
That sounded like a better deal, huh?
Yeah.
She had more often than Skip Chappelle did.
There's a basketball passion and a girlfriend passion.
We had a great coach, Bruce McGregor, there.
You did.
And a tremendous team. Well, the athletes, I still think about those guys. We had an incredible team at Husson that year, and I broke up with her, and then the Thomas College in Waterville.
The offerings were different down there, I'm
It
sure.
was different, yeah, the whole different package there. And,
So we're running short on time, but I know there's one question that I think we may have solved off the camera, but there's been a lot of controversy. Did you ball fake that last shot when you got that last rebound or not? And you showed me the paper. The paper says you did. Did he, Al? Did he, Kevin?
I don't remember.
so hard.
I honestly don't remember. I don't remember.
I wish I could remember so many more details about that game that are just lost that I cannot pull out. The paper, the Courier Gazette, next day or 2 days later, because it was only a 3-day-a-week paper, it said that I faked at least twice before my shot was rejected. And that's how it is. Kevin was a true big man. I wasn't used to playing against a true big man. I had never done so before. And there's lessons you learn.
But, you know, keep in mind, I have to end this by saying, we score one less basket, they score one more basket, we're not sitting here probably.
You're right. We talked about that. I think you and I talked about it, Dave. They had so many players that didn't even come close to scoring their season average.
Yeah.
And if any one of them had, you're right, we wouldn't be rehashing this.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easy.
And
It's in the book.
Foxcroft had a tough team. You had some, other than Kevin, they had some very tough players. These guys did not back down. They played their games, and
As we all know, defense beats offense almost every day of the week.
yeah.
And much of that needs to be attributed to going into the game. What was our game plan? And I think I remember going in that week before we played that Skip's emphasis was on we're not going to run with these guys. We need to emphasize defense, and we need to emphasize discipline offensively.
Breaking the full court press.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, you know, that's where we were smart enough to listen to him. And so that got us over the hump right there. So if there's any credit, that certainly goes to Skip, you know, for
sure
putting a plan in place.
Looking back at this last 2.5 years or 2 years of journey that you've had with this book, what are your thoughts?
Wow. Personally, again, to
It's got to
me,
be tremendously gratifying.
it was exactly gratifying. You didn't know what to expect. I'd never written a book before, never dealt with book publishers before, so it was all new to me. And I just remember through the whole process what a blast it's been, because I'm reconnecting with people that I hadn't spoken to for years. I'm meeting new friends like Al Barron. I mean, and Tom Philbrick, and it's like, you know, it was so good and it's so much fun, I guess is the thing there. And going back to this time and period, and I think it's almost like the way Maine basketball should be type thing, you know, and you know, and all the friendships I got out of it, all the friends I reconnected with, it was just a blast. So that's the word I keep coming back to.
I just wanted to add something. The magnitude of what happened in February 28th of 1975, it couldn't have been as great if it hadn't have been for Al and Madomic Valley High School. It just wouldn't. You don't have two 21-0 teams meeting in a state championship game, and with just the firepower of those teams, that's what made this really, I think, something worth writing about.
Yeah, one thing, and I was thinking about this today, and Kevin and I have talked about this, and Kevin's nephew Toby and I had talked about this. We sort of, you read the book, you go through and again, I did not know Al Barron before this, and now I think I know him pretty well. And you feel there's actually there's a part of me that says, I wish Al had won a state championship. and
I wish he had him too.
No, yeah, I know. But I wish he had won it. No, but my point being is I feel Al deserved to win a state championship, and even if he didn't, he's a champion in my mind, regardless. I mean, he's just a great human being, a great guy, and that was a great team. And you know, it was that one night, you know, one game, and it could have gone either way, and the way it wound up being in a book.
Well, I find some ironies here. I mean, Foxcroft had that one and done, basically. Madomic's tradition started with Al's team in the 74, 73, 74 era with Art Dyer. 50-odd years later, we're now, Madomic Valley is going to play in the tournament, going in the tournament unbeaten, favored to go certainly to the regional championship, if not the state championship. There's so many ironies of that. Here we are exactly 50 years later, and one of the teams is going to be back there again. What's your thought on that, Al?
I think it's amazing. I've always been a Panther fan ever since I moved here, and I'm very supportive. I know the coach. I went to school with his sisters, two of his sisters, and he's a great guy. He's come so close before.
Yes.
He's lost some close state games in Western Maine finals, and he certainly deserves to win, and this is the year.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I can't say thank you enough, and how excited I've been to have you three, two legends of high school basketball, and Dave so articulately put into words what this game means to so many people in the state of Maine, and what high school basketball is and should be in my book.
Yes.
So thank you so much. Dave Albee, Kevin Nelson, Al Barron. This has been High School Hoops, your host Larry Seidlinger, and I hope you guys at home enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed sitting down with these gentlemen, and I thank them for the time. And catch us next week, because we'll have some tournament games on and talk about those. Thanks for watching this special edition of High School Hoops.
At Bath Savings, you know us for our exceptional customer service. And that service extends to our secure online and mobile banking solutions, so you can feel comfortable accessing and managing your accounts wherever you are. And it's all backed by the same personalized customer service from neighbors right here in your community. To learn more about Bath Savings online and mobile banking solutions, visit bathsavings.com. Bath Savings, your neighbor, your bank.
Hager Enterprises, a paving and excavation contractor specializing in all sorts of site work, utility installations, and road construction since 1987.